In this exercise, we'll use the scroll effects to create an opacity change in one of our elements, in one of our graphics. I've literally got two graphics right now. This is a finished example here. One with sort of the background of what was a poster art, and then the element that goes in the middle, which is currently transparent or opacity set to 0. And I've got the scroll set in such a way that when I scroll down, it will slowly and surely become opaque. So let's just take a look at this in the browser right now. Preview page in browser. And if I scroll down, the object in the foreground becomes opaque. So we'll go back and we'll take a look at the settings for that, and maybe I'll just create it quickly from scratch once again. But if I scroll back, of course, it does the opposite. It starts to disappear. And basically I've got this background image is a JPEG, and then the foreground image, which is the illustration of a product, is a PNG. And that allows for transparency, and that allows for that glow feature, if you will, to be consistently looking like a glow over whatever happens to be in the background. All right. So let's go back to Muse here. And I'll just start a new page. Now I've got sort of my work file here, if you will. I've got a lot of different things, but I'll just go to my opacity page and I'll add a new one here. And I'll call it opacity 2. Okay, so we'll just go in there and we'll start from scratch. Now the first thing, of course, with the scroll effects is you need enough distance vertically to scroll. So I'm just going to grab this footer down here. I could drag this bottom of the browser up to match the footer, but I'm just going to grab the bottom of the footer, and if you drag downwards, it's a nice, quick, easy way to extend the length of your page. And you can see a readout telling me how tall my page is right now. I'm almost at the 3,000 there, just past it there. So I'll say roughly 3,000. I'm at 3278. Okay, that's an alternate way than to go into my page properties and setting it manually, but it is a little more organic. In other words, it might be hard to nail a specific number if that was necessary. Anyhow, that's one way to extend the height of my page. Now let me go back to the top here. And I'll import the two images. Now, layers could be an issue here. I could put my images on separate layers, but not necessary. But I do have my layers panel over here. And I do have some layers already established. So maybe I'll just highlight backgrounds and we'll just throw it on there. Okay, so let's start by going place image. And you'll have downloaded these images, but I'm just going to go in here. Oh, I went too far there. Bear with me. And I've got opacity assets. And I'll start with number 1. And we'll just drop that almost at the top of the page here. And if I want to center that, I can just go up to align. Make sure my line is set to content area, which I guess that part is cut off from the demo here. But align to center. And there we go. And I'm just going to observe my X position here is set at 210. Okay, let's bring in that second image. And I think I will keep it on the same layer, so I'll just continue from here. Place, poster bacon 2. And I'll try to nail it here, and it may very well just drop in place, and I think I did. I got lucky, but let's say I wanted to move it around. Of course, I could go in here, and I can change and adjust any of these items. All right. Now, it's the same size as the item below it, so it might be a little difficult to highlight with my selection tool. If I need to do that, then I would go into my layers, actually open that up, and this little box right here is basically creating a new selection. It's hard to tell on the screen, but I'm highlighting right now the box of cookies in the foreground, or if I click on this one beneath here, I'm actually highlighting the background. And I can prove that, I guess, by hiding these things here. There you go. Okay, so there are the two separate objects. So again, if you have an issue with the selection because they're the same size and in the same location, you can highlight through the layers panel, and that's a very handy feature to know. So let me select the top item here. Now, just clicking on it like that actually does not make it the selection, and that's a big thing to understand. You need to check off the little box here where it says click to select items. Now that one's darkened and this one's blank, so I know that the item on top is currently the selection. Now that I've established that, let's go over to scroll effects, and we'll just move over to our opacity and check off the checkbox. Right now everything's flat. All of my points are at the 0 point at the top here of my page. I think I might move things down a little bit, but let's just set a bit of distance here. We're going to start it at 0% opacity, and maybe when it hits the top of the page, when the trigger hits the top of the page, it'll hit 100%. So let's bring that down. Actually, negative numbers go up, so you can see the little slider moving on the screen there. And this would be weird if I left it as is, because right now the trigger point is actually in alignment with the last fade position 2. So I'm going to move that one farther away, and you can see it moving down the page. I can also grab it manually, of course, and then you get sort of a shaded area that indicates when I reach this spot on the page, currently under these settings, it will go back to 0%. Why don't we just give this a try and see what we get? I know I'm not going to like it too much, but let's just see where we're at, and then I'll make some changes. So I can go up to File, Preview Page in Browser, and I'll just start to scroll here. Now it is scrolling out, so I might want to deal with that. And you can see here 0, 0, 0, and then boom, pop, it just appears. And then it fades out. But I can see that I'm achieving an effect, but it's not what I'm after right now. So let me go and make some changes to this then. We'll go back to Muse. And we'll look at our first point. Now again, our first point is at the same place as our trigger, and that's why you got that sudden jarring effect, if you will. So I can actually drag it up as well, and at least that gives me a bit of a fade effect versus just a instant change. I also want it to end at 100%. So I'm going to bring that to 100. Not 1,000, but 100. And I can do one or two things here, or one of a few things. I can actually move this trigger point here farther down, and then move this back up. And that means from here, when this hits the top of the browser, it will start to fade and become more opaque. And when it hits the trigger, it will become 100% opaque, and it will remain opaque for the rest of the duration. So really right now at these settings, this second slider isn't doing a whole lot. But let's just take a look and see what we got. Okay, so I'm scrolling up, and now you can see that it's more gradual as it fades in. Okay, let me tell you what I actually want to do. I want to lock this into place when it gets into position, and then at that point I want to fade the product on. So let's go back to Muse and we'll make those adjustments. So as I said, I don't want it to be 100% when it hits the trigger. I want it to stay to 0. And my trigger as well, let me see here, let me move that. I'm actually going to move things quite a bit higher. Whoa, undo, grab the wrong thing there. I think I'll use this slider here. And if I was to reduce, you can see my slider went way up. I'm just going to bring that way down. Actually, let me just type that in. I'll match it for now, 13, my tab key. And I can grab it now. Okay. Now, as I said, I want to lock this into place. So I'm actually going to go over to my motion. Turn on the motion. I will let it go up at the same rate of the browser, so upwards position at a 1, which is the same as normal speed. I'll turn the the horizontal to 0. And when it hits the trigger, I want it to stop. So that's a 0 for both of the settings in Final Motion. So this should scroll until it hits the trigger point, at which time it will freeze into place, and then the fade will happen. Now, there are two elements, right? So I actually need to do this motion on the other element as well. So let's go down to Layers. I'll highlight that bottom layer. We'll go up to Scroll Effects, hit Motion, and I'll simply turn the last frame off at 0. effects, and I'll set this to 20. That way everything will be visually synced up. And I should save here. And let's give this a test. We'll preview in browser. So if it does everything I wanted, it should go up a little bit, and then stop, and then fade on. Well, it looks like I accidentally did a horizontal movement by 20 pixels, which is fine. It's not what I wanted, but I'll go back and correct that. But it does move over, then it stops, and then it fades on. I actually do like that. Let's go back to Muse. I like it so much, I'm going to exaggerate it even more. So let's see here. I would actually need to move both items down the page some. So let's go to my layers. With my shift key on, I select both items, and I'll just drag that down here. And let's give that a try. Okay. And you'll notice how the distance translates into the horizontal. There we go. And that fades on. Now I'll just switch it to the vertical just to kind of finish the thought here, but I actually do like this quite a bit as an effect. Okay, so back to Muse. One quick change here just to sort of prove a point, I guess. Go up to, I'll highlight, I'll actually deselect by clicking away, then I'll highlight that bottom layer. I have to do the same thing for both. Scroll effects, motion. Let's see here. We want to set that to 0 and that to 1. And that changes it from a horizontal motion to a vertical motion. And of course I need to go and do it to the other one as well. Or they'll come flying in from different directions, which, you know, it's possible. And this one is already set. Because the other one was transparent, it actually didn't come into play, but it was already set to the vertical. So let's give this another try here. And this time it will come from down below, then it will lock into place. All right, so I am going to set that back, but there you go. Scrolls a certain distance. Then when my trigger point hits the top of the browser, it initiates that fade in using the opacity scroll effect by sliding down on the scroll. So let me go back to what I've changed my mind to, and it really doesn't play a role here, but I'm going to change it anyway. This only becomes visible after the trigger is met. Nonetheless, if I change my mind later, then it's already in place. So I've highlighted the bottom element, the background if you will, and I'll have that coming in from the side. And if I make this above 1, it'll be faster than the scroll. If I make it below 1, a fraction, it'll be slower than the scroll. But I'm just going to save that right now. And one last preview. Preview in page in browser. And again, actually, the scroller is down, so I'll be going backwards here. Fade out and move to the left. So if I'm starting at the top, move to the right, lock into position, and fade. And I would like you to recreate this as your exercise today. So just like you see here, flying in from the left, stopping. Once it's stopped, the product on the top, the PNG, starts to fade in. And give it a fairly long fade. And you may need to use trial and error to establish that duration, but this is what I'd like you to build. And that's using the opacity setting in the scroll effects, using Adobe Muse.